So just a quick reminder about Cambridge Cleantech. We're a membership network covering the cleantech sector. We've been in operation for 10 years. And I'm just going to whip you through a couple of slides just to remind you about how we operate. So I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah. Can you click
I can see your screen.
Can you click on slideshow, Martin? At the top?
I am doing, and it's not working for some reason. Does that work better?
Yeah, and then perhaps try again slideshow and then from the beginning. If not, that works.
I think we'll have to go through in this format. Actually, it's not, the scroll through is not working. I've got a new laptop, everybody, so that might be some teething problems with that. But anyway, a bit of background to the Cambridge economy, the growth of the high-tech phenomenon, or Silicon Fen as it is sometimes called. The 70s and 80s ICT, then life sciences in the 90s, and more recently cleantech has been the third wave of the Silicon Fen or Cambridge phenomenon. And of course it's where those sectors overlap in the Venn diagram that you start to see the discussions around the water fountains and the coffee machines and the various incubators, and all of a sudden new companies are spun out. Our definition of cleantech is threefold. So we have renewable energy in the yellow, wind, wave, photovoltaic, environmental in the blue, waste management, water treatment, for example. If everyone could just mute their phones, their screens, please, that would be helpful, thank you. And then we have low carbon in the green, so that might be smart cities and low carbon vehicles and so on. As an organisation, as a membership network, we work across the UK. We also operate and own Oxfordshire Green Tech, and we also do work for the Mayor of London's office, effectively creating a green triangle between those locations. We cover other parts of the UK as well. Across Europe, we run a range of programs, and this is one of our most popular, called Scale Up, whereby we introduce innovation-hungry corporates to innovators, so the likes of Anglian Water, Deutsche Telekom, Cranfield University, Arm have all been through this program. We do a sort of a 2 sides of A4 challenge from a corporate looking for open innovation, and that goes out to innovators across Northwest Europe, and we provide a long list, a short list, and 100 corporates have been through the program, and over 50 contracts have been signed between the innovation hungry corporate and the innovator to develop particular types of technology. We do work globally as well. So in this slide, you can see just some work for the Foreign Office in the UK, and taking forward a cohort of 8 UK and 16 Indian clean tech companies. Rapid accelerator with a focus on access to finance. More recently, we just helped set up Planet Tech in Israel as an equivalent of Cambridge Clean Tech for the country. And just to finish off, access to finance is the most, well, it's the highest priority. It's the biggest topic, the most important issue for our members. And so we run a number of different programs to help with this. We had a finance special interest group at lunchtime for a couple of hours just earlier this week on Wednesday at Barclays Eagle Lab in Cambridge. A number of presenters speaking on finance and opportunities to access finance, followed by Q&A. And we also run a Cleantech Venture Day format. The most recent one was just 6 weeks ago in London at the offices of Taylor Wessing. And that was an introduction to innovators with the investors. Half day at those offices, then 24 companies pitching the day after. I think the good news, so if you want more information on any of these programs,
Is everyone still there?
Yeah, I'm back. I lost Martin.
Oh, yes, I'm here. I think
Yeah, I'm here,
I'm here.
we might have lost Martin.
but I can't hear the speaker anymore.
Martin, we've lost you.
And we can't hear the speaker.
All right, so let's move on, I guess, until Martin shows back. I think he's having some technical difficulties.
Sorry, did I drop out? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, the point here was just that there are lots of companies we work with, from companies doing non-plastic tree guards for saplings, through to people who are doing cleaner air, it's railway stations and in other public spaces, and companies that are putting PV units on the top of refrigerated lorry units to enable the food inside to be kept at a cool temperature rather than using diesel. So a whole range of companies we work with, lots of programs. Come and talk to us if you want to hear more from us and learn about what we do. Very happy to speak to you. So I think that's enough from me. I shall stop sharing now and hand over to our first speaker, who is going to be, to help us set the scene, the very well-known Dr. Frank Levene, who's the principal at Blue Link Worldwide. And you're going to tell us about the US roadmap. Frank, over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Well, thank you, Martin, for the hospitality and Orion for putting everything together. It's very much appreciated. I've known Martin for probably getting on for nearly 10 years now, and he's honoured me also by anointing me as the North American resident expert within the Cambridge Clean Tech Trade Association. So the association goes back for over some time. I myself have had a background in international business development probably all my working life. I'm an American citizen and also live in the UK, and I have a dual nationality, but worked in Asia Pacific as well as in Russia, Africa, and then the United States. So I've got a little bit of a pedigree in international business development. It's probably a little bit more eclectic than the average. And when it comes to talking about investing in the United States, I've always felt that the opportunity in the market that was possibly absent until we've tried to make a contribution to filling it is to bring together expertise, practical people, pragmatic experts, together with investors, particularly in the mid-cap space. But we're looking to work with people who understand their business needs of the SME and the mid-cap enterprise rather than the larger companies. So we've got a gathering together of panelists today. I hope we meet that brief in a meaningful way. Next slide, please, Ariane. So we're looking at the United States. I'm an American citizen, and for all my sins, one still is prone occasionally to fall into stereotyping folks in the United States, and I often think that you need to be a little bit careful about a stereotype. In the United States, there are great differences across the USA. The Southeast is very different from the Northeast of the United States, as indeed is the West Coast, indeed the Midwest. So when looking at the States, as indeed in any particular business walk of life, be careful not to overgeneralize, but get to understand the regionality, the cultural differences. They're not all as visualized on the left, eating a hamburger with a very tight-fitting T-shirt on. They can be very sophisticated and also very much in the mode of perhaps what you've been used to seeing on the television. But you need to do your homework when you go to the States. Every region is different and the culture is quite different from the United Kingdom. So next slide, please, Orion. Let's look at some of the facts rather than some of the caricatures. If you go to the next slide, please, Orion, again. It is a very large country. The US market's highly diversified. At the last count, it was a $20-odd trillion GDP market. Highest ranking for doing business globally. We've doubled our exports out of the UK in the last 10 or 15 years. It's doubled the business going out of the UK to the USA. They're very much a Buy America policy, which again will affect some of your thinking about whether you should set up an entity, whether you should continue to be remote. And that's again an important consideration. The UK is by far the leader in investing in the States, as indeed the US is the leader in investing in the United Kingdom. 1 million Americans work for British companies, but if you are looking to enter the United States, I always say the most important thing before you get into the mechanics or the details is to have a good overall impression of what you're trying to do, what your business plan looks like, what your market entry strategy looks like. It's worth investing in bringing the pieces together in a coherent fashion, because you will need to have a roadmap to measure yourself against. And indeed, if you're looking for immigration support at the immigration authorities, they will look to see a business plan that has substance and is authentic and well thought through. if you're looking to get a green card or any other sort of visa to work and live in the United States. Next slide, please. The sheer size of it, it's a big country, nearly 10 million square miles, getting on nearly 400 million people. Just the sheer size of it. As I mentioned in the introduction, the way to tackle the USA is not to try and eat it all at one go, is to bite off a piece at a time. Do your homework, understand the regions. I'm very much available to provide advice on the regional differences in terms of business appetite, taxes, grants, tax exemptions, various other incubator support that might be available to you in the United States that will tilt the balance in perhaps one state's favor or another. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily always about incentives. It's about where the talent pool is and where your market is. And indeed, at the end of the day, where you really want to live and work if you decide to set up shop in the United States. There are different considerations, whether you like to live in a warm place or not so warm place, or you want to be in a large metro area or living in a semi-rural area. But there are, again, next slide, please. There are some things to point out again in this vein, that not to be overly overwhelmed by the size of the place. The UK would drop in very readily into the middle of the United States, and you would probably hear the splash. It's actually the same size in terms of square miles as Oregon, which has a population of some 4 million, and we've got close to nearly 70 now. So it's a big country, and you've got the East Coast and the flyover states and the West Coast, as they call them. So again, a lot to be considered, and again, it's a big marketplace. So planning and intelligent market research and doing intelligent insighting about what you want to do is the way to get a successful entry and a sustainable entry. Next slide, please. The regions are quite distinct. This is a little bit arbitrary, but again, it is different. I mean, even in the South, you'll find there are differences between in Florida itself. I have a home there and lived there for 30 years. I used to live in Miami and worked in Miami for a year or two. My family remained in Jacksonville. We kept our home, and I used to drive up every Friday night on the I-95, and you'd find that driving up the I-95, you could see from the differences in the music on the radio, you were going through different cultural clusters. As you left Miami, there'd be Latino jazz. As you got close to Orlando, you'd be hearing perhaps more rock music, hard, heavy rock. Then as you got to northeast corner, you'd be going through the country and western.
Frank, just another minute, please.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you very much. And so I think we've got more time because we've lost a couple of speakers, Martin.
Oh right, okay. I'm just following the revised schedule.
I'm sorry to correct the chairman, sir, but I think that's why I'm taking a bit more time, because we have time.
Okay.
Okay. I thought I'd take another 5 minutes, but feel free to correct me again if I'm going too long-winded, Martin.
Well, I think if you can wrap up in the next minute or so, that would be fine. I'm just following the timings on the revised agenda.
Okay.
But
Well, let's go
be back on in a few minutes, Frank, anyway.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. Next slide, please. Again, you're looking at the United States. There are 50 states and 50, almost like 50 countries. So again, you need to do homework on the business climate and the tax regime and the quality of life and the actual demographics and indeed the industry composition. What does it suit your business in terms of the market opportunity that might sit in one state versus another. Next slide, please. Again, you've got the various larger cities that are all well known. Again, I point this out as being something worth noting is that there are second-tier cities like Atlanta that might necessarily always be considered to be a first-tier city, but and Louisville in Kentucky. There are many cities that are second-tier cities that are interesting to make a home for yourself and make an investment. And the cost of finding staff and actually the ability to find staff is much more readily possible in these cities, not necessarily the most famous ones on the map shown here. Next slide, please. In the I-95 is an interesting boundary. Again, nearly 40% of the US GDP sits on that boundary, on that turnpike, 150, 200 miles east of the west of the Atlantic Ocean. You have a very big significant chunk of the US economy. Next slide, please. These are the economic hotspots. Again, they're all very well known to you, but again, life sciences, healthcare, aerospace, advanced engineering, consumer goods, e-commerce, they're all very well known. But again, if you have a business in any of these particular sectors, the United States is an excellent place to look for, to make an investment and set up a presence. Next slide, please. A variety of options for entering the United States. And these, I won't go through them mechanically, but again, they're actually all worth considering. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you outside this meeting about how to put together an entry plan, a business plan that reflects the right options in terms of entry strategy. Next slide, please. Touched on this earlier, it's a melting pot of cultures, and again, not to be underestimated. And again, it's an area of sensitivity, but it's something that can bring quality to your life if you're actually well aligned with the culture in the region that you've decided to make an investment in a new home for yourself. It's a real melting pot, and a wonderful melting pot for that too. Next slide. Again, a pure American when you're doing business, paper size, business cards, talk metric, not imperial. You have a US telephone number, have a .com rather than .co.uk. Next slide, please. Nexus is quite a complicated topic. Again, I'll be happy to talk about this offline, but what actually generates Nexus? It's not only where you do business, it's also where you have a physical presence, where you have staff. It's something to be investigated, working with tax consultants to make sure you actually understand your consequences of some of the decisions you're making about placing your business in a particular location. Next slide. The unions are again another consideration if you want to be in a union-friendly state, which has with it certain consequences in terms of letting staff go. But if you're in a state which actually is not so union-friendly, it's a more benign environment for companies to invest, hire and let people go if that's the case in terms of business situation. Next slide, please. These are the right to work states. As I said, the blue ones are where we have no union laws as such, no unions encouraged to be in existence. And the brown is where the unionization is more stringent and more to be taken into account when you're with hiring practices and letting go practices. Next slide, please. And on the conclusion, this is the roadmap. Again, I was alluding to this at the beginning. You need to have a good market entry plan that brings together all these various elements. I'd like to think that the folks around the table and the folks in my ecosystem, if you want to talk to me offline, are very capable of helping you with all these various elements. And I'd be pleased to bring them to your attention if you want to have a conversation subsequently in the one-to-ones. That's as quick as I could do it, Martin. I think we're still not too far out on the timing, but hopefully not too bad.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. No, that's terrific. Thank you for that introduction and the notion of the roadmap to set up the context for the people attending today. Right, so let's keep moving on. Next we have Alan Hyatt, who's the International Trade Advisor for DIT. And Alan leads on energy, the environment and clean growth. So Alan, over to you. You've got 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you, Oriane, for putting on the slide. As Martin mentioned, Alan Hyatt. I'm with the UK Government's Department for International Trade, working in the east of England, working with companies. And I lead in energy and environmental in the clean growth area. I'm proud to say we are strategic partners with Cambridge Clean Tech. And following Frank's roadmap, I'm grateful to him for pointing out all the diversity. I'm conscious that it might be a bit might seem intimidating to enter a new market, and particularly the United States with its 50 different countries, as it were. So my few minutes with you is to demonstrate how Department for International Trade, or DIT, can help businesses to establish in new markets, generally speaking, but including the USA. And my comments as an ITA in the clean growth space refer to worldwide, but of course all are very relevant within the United States. Can I just say before we move on, if you already have an international trade advisor, please get in touch with them about what I'm about to say. If you don't have an international trade advisor, do use the form or my email that appears at the end of my presentation, and we can make arrangements to have a meeting and set you up with someone. Thanks, Oriane. So what do? We have DIT has a worldwide network. Because we're UK government, we have offices in British embassies and other diplomatic missions everywhere. And international trade advisors like me are able to provide impartial, one-to-one support across the board, including very much in the clean economy. And we liaise on your behalf with my colleagues in offices worldwide. In the US, we have 8 offices, all of which are in one or other of the main cities that were mentioned in Frank's presentation. Significantly, and this is where it really matters, we have specialists in these offices who know their markets, who know the various markets within the United States, the geographies and so on, as well as the sectors, and specifically they have contacts. They can put you in touch with people that matter, whether it be accountants or tax advisors if you're setting up, or distributors or agents, or for that matter directly with customers if that's the proper way ahead. And they do so through events and exhibitions, and we have something called business opportunity alerts that we could talk about offline if you like. Thank you, Oriane. Taking an example from my own recent experience, which is in the offshore wind energy sector, which it's worth pointing out the US refers to as just simply as offshore wind. They have a different, we call it OWE, they call it OSW. Coming back again to Frank's point about doing things American way. My colleagues in New York and Washington and Boston have been particularly busy because the Eastern Seaboard in general is very busy just now with the advent of offshore wind in the United States. There's not much in the water at the moment, but my goodness, there's going to be a lot in the future because USA's targets are similar to our own targets for 2030 something, and we're already the world leader. My colleagues have been involved at the International Partnering Forum, and that word partnering is key because that is one of the things that we are best at, and that is helping companies to achieve partnerships with others, whether they're formal or informal in that respect. We match UK experience, whatever the industry is, with USA partners and customers. And I'd like to show you a short video in just a moment about which we shot in the context of an event we did last year with Virginia Beach Economic Development Agencies, who are very keen to attract UK and for that matter European expertise in the offshore wind sector. And we're showing it because towards the end in particular, there are several sound bites which helps to demonstrate how others have perceived getting into the US market. Thank you, Oriane. If you could show the video, Oriane, that would be good.
Yeah. Just stop sharing and. Can you see the video?
Yeah, you can see it. There we go.
Yes, thank you, Alan. In this section of the presentation, we'll be hearing from 3 British companies that have already begun working with partners in the USA on the Virginia Beach offshore wind opportunity.
The US offshore wind sector is one of the most promising in the world.
Virginia is the key area for wind in America.
The market in the US will be of benefit to the capability that we have in the Eastern India.
The American market is much more open to talking than any other market we work in.
My piece of advice would be as soon as COVID restrictions lift, come visit Virginia Beach, come visit our region, see our assets.
Ask for help. There is so much help out there. There are so many people in this industry that will help, that will go the extra mile, that will make introductions.
Well, I would say don't be afraid. I mean, sometimes people can get tied up with the fact that there could be political barriers in place, but at the end of the day, what our finding is businesses like doing business with other businesses.
Thank you, Oriane, for that. And if we move back to the presentation, just for a few more minutes. What I'd like to do now, in consolidating what I've been saying and showing you, is to demonstrate how our specialist support works. In healthcare and life sciences, for example, we're based in Boston, and there's a huge amount of activity between Cambridge and Boston in particular. If we think of automotive and advanced engineering, thinking specifically about electric vehicles, EVs, about the development of hydrogen, battery technology, and so on, that tends to be centered in Chicago, although there's a lot of that going on as well in the Western Seaboard and out of Houston, and in that matter, the Eastern Seaboard. If we think of emerging technologies, particularly in terms of software development, design and development, Los Angeles and San Francisco, in terms of communications and so on. And finally, consumer products. Who'd have thought that we in the Department of International Trade would have helped an English whiskey distiller in Norfolk to sell in the United States? So that basically sums it up. If we just move on to the last slide with my contacts on it. If anyone would like to ask any questions, I'll be here for the question and answer session. And if it's not possible to do it then I can get back to you next week if you want to send me an email with the question. As I said before, if you have an international trade advisor from DIT already, do get in touch with them and ask them, tell them about this event and ask them to help you to do work in the US. If you haven't got an international trade advisor, let me know, and if it's not me, it'll be somebody else who perhaps is more in tune with whatever it is you're doing within our region, and we will help you to connect with like-minded customers in the United States. And that's all for me. Thank you very much, and thanks, Oriane, for your help.
Thank you.
Alan, that was terrific. Thank you very much. So I don't think we can say more than a Scotsman selling English whiskey in the USA. I mean, come on, how serious does he take his job? So that's terrific, Alan. Thank you very much.
Perhaps I'm worried about the union.
Maybe it's that. Anyway, thank you. That was terrific. Really a great overview on the services that you provide to support businesses into the market in the USA. Right, let's pop back to Frank, who's going to take us through a story and a bit of a case study on one of the companies that he has supported into the market in the USA in 5 minutes, please, Frank. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm maybe a little bit short on that, but Phil Cotton, unfortunately, who's the managing director for Hunter Phillips, is unwell with COVID. So he and I have been working very closely together for the best part of nearly 7 or 8 months now. And I wanted just to share some lessons learned that are not hopefully breaching any confidentialities with Phil, but certainly he's had terrific help from a number of people around the table, particularly Torelli and Associates. I think what Phil has learned, if I may say so, is the importance of doing some planning. And again, Torelli were very kind in providing a redacted business plan that, again, I'm sure they'll be open to share again. I've got copies of it to help people want to kickstart a sort of a market assessment and to help them fill in the blanks. It's good to have a best practice business plan that you can follow in terms of structurizing your own business plan for a US market entry. You see how the best of them works, and so that's an important consideration. And again, he was very conscious of the importance of doing research. He's gone over to the United States to visit a number of different exhibitions in the search and headhunting world that he inhabits. I want to mention that Phil is a very effective search consultant, has a search practice. He's based in Manchester, but he's decided, having done a fair bit of homework, and of course there's some of these personal issues around where he and his wife and family like to reside, he's decided to set up shop in Florida. And he's not quite decided whether you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, but he's done a lot of work working with the legal team is incorporated, working with Torelli. He's got an FEIN. As a result of that, he's been able to open a bank account. So he's followed, if you like, on that roadmap, some of the sort of important stepping stones, early ones. Do your homework, do the research, think about the location, elect a location that works for you both personally and professionally in terms of the practice he's in. Which covers solar, wind power, and all that in the renewable space. He's also been working with a practice, I sing their praises, Trillian Associates, who are 30, nearly 40 years in existence. And I know Greg will be talking to the practice in a short while, but it offers a very sympathetic approach to SMEs, having worked with SMEs through pretty much all Tom's career with his practice. So I think I didn't want to overdo it, Martin, in terms of sharing too much of the soft issues around Phil's entry, but it's just that he's actually been very methodical and followed the map and worked with people who are pragmatic and practical that I brought to his attention. And this is again part of the rationale of these events over the last 8-9 years, Martin, is to bring people to the table who can help companies in Britain who speak the same language and are practical and giving them the right advice.
Yeah, no, that's terrific, that, Frank. So a bit of a story there, a bit of a case study on a real life UK company in search and selection, which has taken the footsteps of moving into the market in the USA and has effectively had his hand held where needed by the range of people such as Frank and other colleagues we're going to hear from shortly around the table today. Just one question, Frank. You said that he managed to get an FNLI or something. What is that?
Federal Employment Identification Number. It's what once you've actually incorporated, once you get one of those in your MIT, you can open a bank account, which is actually important, because in the United States, which I didn't touch on, you forced me to remind me actually, that the US is rather old-fashioned. They still like to get checks, and having a bank account, banking checks and receiving checks is quite important consideration in setting yourself up.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll have our abbreviations and items that people say, well, what's he talking about with the FDI? So thank you for that. I mean, just shows you the importance of understanding the locality and what you need. You need that thing to get something else, namely the bank account. So thank you for clarifying on that. Right, let's keep on moving. And our next speaker is going to look at the legal side of things in America. And I'm pleased to welcome Greg Casemer, who's an attorney at Thorelli and Associates. Greg, over to you. You have 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you to Frank as well. My name is Greg Casemer. I'm an attorney, a U.S. attorney at Thorelli and Associates. And as you've heard, we have been in business for 30 to 40 years, exclusively helping small and mid-sized UK and EU companies prepare to do business or expand their business in the US. We're a 5-attorney firm dedicated to an international law practice. Approximately 90% of our client base would be small to mid-sized UK and EU businesses. Unlike most other law firms in the US that serve the international community, we're not specialists. We don't restrict our practice. We're not only immigration or only tax advice. We do everything. From setting up your corporation to begin with, we work with you to figure out the right location, the right form of corporation, the right incorporation documents, the tax ID numbers. Because we've been doing this a long time, we have developed certain relationships with, for example, banks in the US. Most of them will require you to make a trip to the States in order to open up an account. We happen to know 2 banks that will not require that if we vouch for you. And so it's through things like that that we make the process easier, and we free up your time to focus on developing your business. So everything from the initial formation to your shareholder agreements. Are you going to hire a sales staff for the US? Then you need employment agreements. Are you going to use a distribution network instead of sales staff? Well, then you need distributor and reseller agreements. Do we need to set you up for immigration matters? Do you plan to, send people for a long term to the US to work? We handle all of that and more. Mergers and acquisitions, online businesses have their own policies. Pretty much everything you can think of except criminal law. Don't get yourself arrested in the US because we can't help you on that. But pretty much everything else, we're one stop. And that is the experience that we've had with our client base. Our clients want to send one email. They want to CC us. They want to pick up the phone and make one phone call. They don't want 4 or 5 specialists. They don't want to figure out who they need to call for each particular issue. They want one invoice that shows what all their legal costs are, and that's what we do for them. And in fact, having the experience of working with UK companies has affected how we practice law. We try to work in a way that that takes advantage of whatever synergies there are in knowing and understanding the business relationships over a long period of time. So, so the topic that Martin has so generously given us is using lawyers the American way. Okay, what is the American way? The American way of using lawyers is adversarial. I look out for me, you look out for you. Lawyers in the US are trained from law school to be zealous advocates for their client. And that means that a lawyer's first duty is to protect the interest of his client. Protect it from who? From the lawyer on the other side, of course. If you're doing business in the US, your competitors and even your business partners are involving their attorneys from the start. And that is one of the major differences between the way law is practiced in the US and the way it is in the UK. In the UK, lawyers are brought in at the end, or they're brought in when a problem becomes apparent. In the US, it's a much more proactive thing. A lawyer is available along the way to keep you out of trouble to begin with, because the effects of getting entangled in litigation in the US can be much more expensive, much more catastrophic. And so it makes sense to limit your business risk up front in the process of preparing to do business or working out business agreements than to try to clean up a mess after it has already happened. Oh, and the other thing is in the US, our judges do not have the same scope of authority as you do in the UK. They don't decide, they don't weigh the facts and decide factual questions. They say what the law is, but the attorneys do much more of the work in the actual litigation that goes on. And because of that, litigation is understandably more expensive, tends to last longer than it does in the UK. So how that plays out, I have two examples for you. The first example is a basic contract situation. You're selling your goods in the US. You submit a quotation to your customer submits a purchase order back, you send them an invoice, you make and sell the goods, they pay. That's a fairly normal practice. But the buyer, in the course of providing you with this purchase order, has attached in fine print terms and conditions of sale, okay? And those terms and conditions of sale are written by the buyer's lawyer to protect the buyer. And so even though you got a nice price from your quotation, you took on a tremendous amount of initial risk, of additional risk without realizing it. In these terms and conditions that you're stuck with now, you have all the responsibility for defending the buyer if the buyer gets sued when he's using your product. If the buyer does some harm to your business, there's another provision in the buyer's terms and conditions that limit his liability to you. So even though there may be tens of thousands of dollars of harm to you, the buyer's duty to repay you for whatever harm has been done is limited to maybe $10,000 or $1,000 or $1. How did this happen? Well, the buyer's attorney got involved at the beginning of the process and said, hey, here's all the additional things you want to attach to the backside of your purchase order in order to protect you from unexpected liability. Now, if nobody ever has a problem with the goods that you're selling, with the buyer's purchasing, this additional risk doesn't show up. It lays dormant until there's a problem. So if you run the kind of business that never has a problem and nothing ever goes wrong in any way, good for you. This will never come up and bite you in the rear. But problems happen. Employees are fallible. Mistakes get made. Things break unexpectedly. And if that's going to happen, you want to be prepared with limitations on your own risk as well.
Just another minute, please, Greg.
Oh, okay. So just one other thing then, I guess I'd say in one other example of how these things come up in the US, you have hired like a vice president of sales, real good salesman. You've been smart enough to sign him up to a contract, and that contract has a non-compete provision in it, which is great. You've locked him in, you've prevented him from going to his competitor if he ever should decide to leave. Unfortunately, he's set up residence in California without your attorney knowing about it, and he decides to leave, and he says, by the way, I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm going to your biggest competitor, and there's nothing you can do about it. And he's right, because the law in California protects him. And as Frank mentioned, we're 50 states with 50 different sets of law, and you need an attorney to let you know the risks involved in doing something like letting a valued employee be domiciled in California, because California will not enforce non-compete covenants no matter how well they're written. And so getting a lawyer involved up front when dealing with this employee saves you from an unexpected loss on the other end. So I will drop my email into the chat, and I will be around for questions and answers at the end of the session. Back to you, Martin.
Greg, thank you very much indeed. A real sort of highlight there of some of the intricacies involved in doing business from a legal perspective in the USA, particularly like that little point about, well, ordinarily you would have to travel to the States to open a bank account, but because you've got an agreement with a couple of the banks, then you can vouch for the company. I mean, that can save you, a couple of £1,000 just in travel by using your services. So thank you very much for that, Greg. Still conscious of time, let's move on. Now we're going to hear from Ian Metcalf, who's the Director for the UK and Ireland at Fairfax County. Ian, you have 8 minutes as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I will share my screen and put some slides up if I can make the technology work. Have I appeared? Oops.
Yeah. Can you put it on full mode?
I can do that, indeed. Slideshow. Good. So, hello, everybody. As Martin said, I'm Ian Metcalf. I'm the UK Director for Fairfax County, which is the bit of Virginia which lies between Washington, D.C. and Dulles International Airport, DC's International Airport. So in many ways, you can think of me as being from the DC area, albeit it's the taxpayers of Fairfax that pay my wages. I'm not going to do a big sell on the area. I'll happily do that and explain to anybody why the area is a great place to live. I used to live there myself. I'm now in Fleet in Hampshire, but I can wax lyrical about it for quite a while, but I won't do that in view of the time today. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, it's in the I-95 corridor that Frank put up that has 40% of the US population alongside it. We are smack bang in the middle of that, running north to south. 3 big airports, huge market. And I put up some announcements from last week showing you we've got Google there, we've got Facebook there, we've had Amazon Web Services for forever, but also a couple of years ago they announced they were putting there what they call HQ2, their East Coast headquarters. So it's the sort of industries we get around are the big tech industries, and also lots and lots of corporate HQs who want to be near to the federal government in DC. So how can we, as the Fairfax County EDA, help? But I'd generalize that a little bit. I'll say, how can any EDA help? Every state has some sort of economic development organization, sometimes called an authority like us, sometimes an agency, whatever, but all sorts of different EDOs. And a lot of counties do as well. And so I'll talk about what we can do, but actually, as you look around where you might want to base a business in the US, I'd always say talk to the EDAs, EDOs from the jurisdictions that you're considering, because they will have a lot of help, and most of them, like us, are free. They're paid for by the taxpayers in the area, so it doesn't cost the company anything. So what can we do? Well, we can help you find customers. Lots of people can do that. DIT is great, as you heard earlier on. Some of the banks are fantastic. If when you're doing things in food and beverages, for instance, HSBC do things. We can do commercial research, and we can help you find where we're a little bit different, because we are adjacent to the federal government. We are very knowledgeable as an organisation about government contracting. So we can help you find contracts, and very often find contacts, find staff who can find the way into the agencies that that you might need or consider. I've put a couple of websites on this slide, which I'll stick in the chat afterwards as well. sam.gov is where you find an awful lot of the federal opportunities. I'll put them there. What else can we do? We can research locations for you. So the 50 states is as a couple of speakers have said, very, very different taxation regimes in each state, and in some states it will literally be double what it is in others. Generally, the further south you go, the easier the business environment. The further north, more difficult. I would never counsel anybody about setting up in California or New York unless there is some really, really good reason, because you'll spend most of your time fighting off the taxman. But we can do that. We can compare that, and I've put a website up there as well, which will let you compare tax rates from any two states. We'll find your routes to market. So we've got, we ran actually a very successful series of seminars a little earlier this year, one of which was specifically on clean tech. And we got some really good partners to come and talk. So business incubators, for instance, in Fairfax, we've got a thing called Smart City Works that very much focuses on clean and green technologies applied to the built environment. We can help you find industry partners. I'll mention data centers again in a moment, but it's Northern Virginia is the sort of the data center capital of the Western world. We've got acres and acres of them, and of course they're always trying to reduce their power consumption. We can help you find developers if you're in the built environment. We can help introduce you to people. We have a lot of development going on as I think called the Silver Line brings a metro out from DC to the airport. So large mixed-use developments, all looking to reduce their carbon footprint. Innovators, DARPA is the defense one. We've got good contacts there, and we can quite often introduce you to our own county and state representatives. Lots of other stuff. I won't go into a lot of detail, but gladly pick up all those in the Q&A. And then, of course, the environment around it, the lawyers, as you'll see, I've put first, always get a lawyer before you do anything else. It's a recurrent theme in the States, and you know, agree with everything that Greg said about that. Trade associations, really, really important. Most of them are based in Fairfax because they want to be near the government. We can introduce you to the right associations for your trade. So in terms of, I don't know what all the businesses on this call, what their specific angle is, but what I've done is I've pulled out from that series of seminars that we ran some of the particular interest groups in our area. So federally, there's a load of money being pumped into new power sources and new means of distributing power, either by fixed lines or by batteries. Water and wastewater management. The federal government owns huge swathes of the US on things like the defense. The Department of Defense owns more land than the UK. The Indian reservations and things like that are also hugely land intensive, and they tend to be in areas where there's a problem with water and wastewater. So
1 minute, please, Ian.
Of course. So that and space surveillance for those things. Virginia as a state, previous speakers have already mentioned the big drive to offshore wind power and land use in the county. So people who work very closely with basically just the next door offices to our agency. A lot of interest in smart buildings and sustainable development, and a huge amount of interest in electric vehicles and better parking and traffic management to reduce emissions. Anybody who's ever driven in and around DC will know that the traffic and parking is huge. And then the industrial interest, data centers, corporate HQs I've mentioned, low carbon aviation. I could go on about for another hour, but I'm sure Martin would get quite upset if I did. Specifically, if you want to deal with those governmental agencies, and particularly government contracting, there are lots and lots of ways of doing it. I'm not just an economic developer. The reason I represent Fairfax in the UK is because my private practice is in government contracting. I won't go through all these initials on here, but if you think you have something you want to sell to the US government, by all means get in touch with us as Fairfax, and you get what I sell to other people for free as a result of Fairfax in terms of helping you find the way into the government contracts. And I think that's it. The photos from a few years ago, but I'll go with that. Those are my contact details. I'll put them in the chat as well. And thanks for your time today. I hope that's helpful. I'll try and stop sharing so somebody else can have it. There we are.
Ian, thank you very much. Terrific overview of one particular locality on the East Coast. Thank you very much for that. So, conscious of time, let's keep going. And I'd next like to introduce Michael Sankey, who's from Avalara, the tax technology manager for that particular company. And you're going to tell us all about being chased by the taxman, as Ian has just suggested, if we don't locate in his particular area. So, Michael, over to you. 8 minutes, please.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for inviting me along as well, Martin. It's great to kind of be involved. So yeah, my name is Mike Sankey. I work for Avalara. For those who are unfamiliar with Avalara, we are an end-to-end automation software firm who really take the stress out of the uncertainty of indirect taxes. We've got a cloud-based solution which helps businesses of all shapes and sizes navigate the murky waters of indirect taxes. The US is the main focus for today, but we also can manage things globally as well. Now, you've already heard from Alan at the DIT and Greg from Torelli & Associates and other speakers. And it's crucial that you do speak to these people before you commence expansion plans in the US. Avalara can provide software solutions to help manage the taxes, but actually getting the advice up front is crucial. So please do make sure you make contact with them after this call. However, for the purpose of today's session, I'll be providing information on how businesses can automate the sales tax registration, the calculation, filing, and remittance of sales taxes across the US. So just a little bit of information about Avalara there. I'm not going to leave it up too long because I've kind of just given you a little bit of an overview anyway, and what we do and how we do it. But essentially, we are a business of over 3,000 employees. We're spread across 12 different offices across the world now. But one of our biggest ones is in Seattle in Washington, because that's where the company was kind of born as well. So understanding nexus is one of the most important things. Now, the word nexus is understanding an obligation of why you may need to register for sales tax, particularly within the US. And we do find that most businesses find that to be one of the biggest headaches because it is always changing. When trading in the US, there are many factors to consider. And Frank touched upon some of these earlier in his presentation. But most importantly, it's knowing when and where you need to register. Each state has different thresholds that are in place that need to be met prior to registration under new nexus legislations that came about after a Supreme Court ruling some sort of 2 to 3 years ago. Now, nexus, as I've just said, there is a term that defines a connection or business presence in a state or a jurisdiction that may have triggered a responsibility to charge, remit sales taxes within that state. So see if I can just get these all to come up just so it's easier to go through them. So there are many different scenarios that can actually help you trigger an obligation to register. A physical presence, storing inventory within a state, traveling for business, attending trade shows, or simply it could just be the number of sales that you've made there or a total dollar value as well within that state. Each state has their own different thresholds that they've put in place. There is nothing that is uniform across all of the different states, but it's well worth understanding what they are to ensure that you stay compliant and you get compliant from the outset. Well, thankfully, Avalara has developed a comprehensive service that really enables businesses to understand these obligations in a more detailed way. We have sales tax risk assessments. It's done in two parts. The first is to identify which states potentially need a registration. It's worked out via a questionnaire that looks at business activity, locations, and other factors. The second is data-driven, where we take sales data from previous years to ascertain whether there's a historical liability, if that is something that needs to be looked at. However, most businesses who are expanding into the US won't have that concern yet, mainly because they're only just starting out. With the information, we're then able to recommend and also assist with registrations, as well as voluntary disclosure agreements if they're required. And it's just a way of us being able to essentially assist businesses as much as possible in terms of the compliance angle. Now, this is just zooming in very quickly into a single part of the state of Colorado. And the reason why we're showing this state is simply because the US sales tax system is very granular and very disparate as well. And this really highlights it quite clearly to you. There are over 14,000 taxing jurisdictions across the US, and that includes some 40,000 different tax rates. Now, due to the very fragmented nature of the sales tax regime, it's crucial that you have a solution that can pinpoint where a sale is being made so that correct sales tax rates can be applied. And as you can see from this slide that you can see on the screen now, it's not as straightforward as it seems. This is a picture of a single zip code in the state of Colorado, but within that zip code, there are 5 different jurisdictions for taxation. And as you can see from here, there are 2 different colors on the same street, and you may have neighbors living side by side who are in different tax jurisdictions, and therefore they're getting charged different tax rates. And that can get potentially very, very difficult to manage if you're trying to do it independently and manually. But thankfully, Avalara's tax solutions use geolocation to provide guaranteed accuracy to ensure businesses who are expanding into the US only charge what is due where it's due. That's if sales tax needs to be applied to it. But talking about exemptions, etc., if you're doing business to business or business to government transactions, that's a different story, but we can always explore that at a later stage as well. So the Avalara solution is a powerful artificial intelligence system that is basically plugged into any business system that you have, either via a pre-built connector that we have. I think we have over 1,200 of them now to all business types of systems, but we can also do custom ones as well if that's required. Now, due to the rich array of different ERP systems, e-commerce, accounting, and payment gateways, we're able to provide sales tax rates that are live in shopping carts as well if you're doing business to consumer sales. And then you'd be able to get the information directly in your source system for invoicing or payments so that they can be taken at that point of contact. Included within this solution is our address validation service as well, meaning that even if you only have a partial address of where the customer is, it will also provide alternatives to allow you to then select the correct one to make sure it's as accurate as possible.
1 minute, please, Michael.
No problem. So although we're focusing on the sales and use tax during this presentation today, as I said already, Avalara actually has content and functionality that works globally for indirect taxes with GST, VAT, even customs and duties if your sales reach the de minimis thresholds for any countries that you're selling into as well. Okay. Now, once the sales tax rates have been calculated, it then has an obligation to be reported. And this is the final step that actually then can essentially help you complete the circle of compliance. In order to do that, You wouldn't want to do it manually, especially if you're in a number of states. So we can fully automate the solution so that we pre-populate filings within all of the states where you end up registering, so that users have access to a centralized dashboard that provides live updates and is allowing you to then keep a very close eye in a single place of all your registrations, all the filings that are required, how much tax is due, and when it should be paid. And as I can't remember who said at the start, but if you have a US bank account, I think it was Frank, apologies, then you can also set up an ACH treasury functionality within Avatax so that that is hands off as well. We can pull all the funds from your bank account and remit it on your behalf. And hopefully I've hit it just under my time limit, but that's everything from me.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Michael. That's a very useful overview in terms of some of the issues and how you approach them from your own business perspective. So let's keep things moving on. And next up, we have Simon Bradbury, who's a partner at Appleyard Lees, and is going to talk to us about IP and warranties and so on in the USA. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Martin, just checking, you can see the screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it well.
Yeah, good. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about IP and warranties in the USA, and it's going to be very much a whistle-stop tour. Main types of intellectual property in the US are utility patents, which is what we'd normally term to be patents in Europe. Design patents, which cover the shape and configuration and decorative features of any design or product. Trademarks, and lastly, I'll touch on copyright. When looking at the US, I think one of the important things to think about for intellectual property is what's your business strategy in the US? You know, what sort of business are you offering? Are you going to be a service provider? Is it a product that you're going to be offering for sale? Is that something you're going to be manufacturing in-house? Or is it something that you might contract out to maybe a US manufacturer? Are you going to be selling direct end to customer or intermediary or a distributor? Is it going to be a business to business or business to consumer? Are you going to license it to others? And another option is, are you going to franchise a particular model into the US? Also, I think things to consider are, what's your long-term strategy? Is it a sustainable business? Are you entering the US market with a view to maybe selling it or selling a particular product to another company, as in hiving off a bit of your business? Or maybe you're looking at a flotation, maybe a NASDAQ listing. It's also good to look at what is your technology or product offering. Sometimes it could be a platform technology which could be defined by a particular application or market that you're trying to service. It could be quite broad. So whilst your primary market maybe could be green tech, it might be that there may be other fields which may take the technology and you could license that to others. It could be a narrowly defined product. How far developed is the product? Will there be modifications or improvements? And can it easily be copied? Lastly, is it a service? Is it a service where maybe you're going to be keeping the technology in-house and just offering customers access to maybe your database or your services? Or is it something which is going to be in a black box that you're going to maybe sell to clients? Lastly, it may be something which is fairly low technology, or maybe you're a sort of a Me Too product, which you're following another product which is already on the market in the US. Touching on utility patents, these protect how a product works and features which enable it to work. Patents can cover products, processes, methods, software, apps, new uses and combinations of existing products. Typically, you would extend a UK patent application to the US. This is normally within 12 months of the original filing, or if you file an international application, then within 30 months from the original filing, you can extend into the US. Some clients do actually file direct into the US patent, into the US PTO. and that's absolutely fine. And I've got a number of clients in the sort of medtech sector where maybe they're not that interested in the US, in Europe or the other parts of the world, and the US is really their main focus. There are also differences in what's patentable in the UK versus the US, as are in other jurisdictions like in Japan. But generally speaking, when a UK patent attorney is drafting a patent application, they're drafting it with a view to the application ultimately going into the US, Australia, Japan, a load of other jurisdictions. US utility patents are examined for both novelty and inventive step. Looking at design patents, these protect the shape or decoration of a product. It doesn't protect features of a design which are solely dictated by the product's technical function. And US design patents are examined for novelty only, so there's no additional hurdle of inventive step. One thing you need to bear in mind when looking at launching in the US is undertaking some freedom to operate searches. So when you file a patent application, it doesn't actually give you the right to do anything. What it does do is give you the right to prevent others from working the invention. So it's often advisable to undertake third-party searches, undertake patent searches for third-party patents prior to launching your product. If you do identify any problem patents, then if you do it at an early stage, you can hopefully design around the patents, or maybe you might be able to take a license to any of those problem patents. You can also put a watch on patent applications which haven't yet been granted, so you can see how they develop during the prosecution to see whether or not they continue to be a potential issue. And I'd certainly avoid giving any warranties to licensees regarding your FTO position. And what I would do is I'd put the responsibility back onto any licensee or maybe any person you might be selling the technology to, for them to undertake their own freedom to operate analysis. And undertaking some form of FTO is pretty important in the US because they have something called treble damages, where if it can be shown that you knew that there was a patent or there's a reasonable expectation that a patent would be in existence, then a court in the US can award treble damages. So they would look at what the infringement had cost the party who had been aggrieved, and then they would just times that number by 3, and that can be a fairly punitive punishment. Moving on to trademarks in the US. So trademarks protect the brand or a product name, and typically they are words. They could be letters, they could be numerals, they could be a logo, it could be a shape of the goods or the packaging. So a good example of that is the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle, which has been registered as a trademark. It could be a sound, which could be like a jingle, or maybe it could be a color, such as maybe the particular color of blue for Barclays for banking services. In a similar way to patents, if you want to have a trademark registration in the US, you'll need to register the trademark in the US. You can extend a US trademark to the US, or alternatively, you can file a direct US trademark. Whilst it's not as imperative timeline-wise to file a trademark after the initial UK filing, you should only really file a trademark in the US prior to you wanting to launch a product. That's because you do have to show that there is an intention to use the trademark in the US. It's often advisable to undertake clearance searches before launching in the US, just to see whether or not there are any third-party rights already out there. And it's quite interesting. I travel quite a bit to the US, and I see similar brands, but slightly different.
For 1 minute, Simon, please.
Sure. But what I would say is you always want to undertake a clearance search before launching in the US, and again, limit any warranties offered if you intend to license the product or sell it through a distributor. One thing I would mention, just going back to that last slide about selling through a distributor, if you do have a party in the US who are going to distribute for you, you should file the trademark application in your name, and your license agreement should make sure and make it clear that they are a licensee and they are acquiring goodwill on your behalf, because what you don't want is for the distributor to actually file in their name and for them to acquire the goodwill and then to switch to a competitor product which they would sell under your brand, and you wouldn't be able to do anything to stop them. We've got an office in Cambridge, Manchester, Leeds and Halifax, and also at Ardley Park. If you've got any questions, by all means reach out, and thank you very much, Martin.
Simon, thank you very much for finishing us in good time. And now, last but by no means least, we have Laurie Spicer, who's the US Expansion Advisor for Foothold America, and is going to tell us all about HR. Laurie, over to you. I think you're on mute, Laurie.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, guys. Okay. Sorry. Right, can you guys see that?
Yeah. Do you mind putting it on full screen, please?
Yeah.
Super. Thanks.
Right, good. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. So my name is Laurie Spicer. I'm a U.S. Expansion Advisor with Foothold America. And I am an American living in Britain. I've lived here for nearly 30 years. Came over on a 2-year visa and decided to stay. But I've run my own tech company. So I understand the complexities of the tech space. I did that for about 18 years. And I also have been advising business over the best part of 8 years on expansion to the US. And today, what I'm going to talk to you about is the complexities around HR and employment in the US. And it's not an easy space, but this is really where Foothold America, this is what we specialize in. So our core service, as I said, is in HR and employing US workers. We have offices both in the UK and the USA to support the onboarding of employees or assigned personnel, which I will explain the differences to you guys. So certainly in the other presentations today, you will see that there's a lot of decision making that needs to happen prior to your deciding what your market entry strategy will be, using various associations and partners, lawyers and accountants, and the various resources that UK companies have to understand what the model is of your entry strategy. And I'm going to talk about the different ways that you can hire staff in the US, or whether or not you want to hire or transfer your UK staff to the US. So really the 3 models, although I've got 4 here and I'll explain why. So there's an employer of record, and that's where you engage with a third party who becomes the official employer of record in the United States to hire the worker under their banner, and they're the ones who are on the hook for all the compliance in the US, the payroll taxes, the insurances for that particular employee. Or you can decide you want to set up a US entity, employ staff directly under your own banner, but then you have to think about the issues of HR compliance, making sure that you comply with each state law. So employment laws are state specific. So that means if you are a remote company and you have employees in California and you have employees in New York, then those employees have to be compliant under different rules. You can, however, also, and we see a lot of our clients do this, where they start to test the market in the US. They might start with an employer of record, so they can kind of not worry about all the compliance and the rules and regulations under employment. And then once they get traction in the States, they can hire directly. They set up a US entity and hire directly as their team grows. There's also contractors, which you can hire contractors, and very much same rules apply in the UK with the IR35 issues. You just have to be careful and research the IRS classifications of whether or not they are truly an employee or whether or not they actually are a contractor. And if they kind of look like an employee, you just need to be careful that you don't treat them as an employee and you hire them as a contractor. So the employer of record model is a turnkey cost-effective solution which can save a company a lot of time and money. Reasons why you might think, yes, there is business in the US, but I want to test the market. I'm not quite sure. We've got maybe 1 or 2 clients in the market and we want to hire someone in the US to kind of build out our business. We can hire someone on your behalf within 5 days. The candidate must have the right to work in the United States and you do not need to have a US entity. However, a lot of our clients choose to do so for commercial purposes, and that's where you really need to speak to a lawyer and a tax accountant for those reasons. Again, no long-term contract, 30 days notice, and it can really reduce the risk of your sort of market entry. And if you need to have a market exit, it makes things less complicated. We do the offer letters for the employees, the background checks, the payroll, the taxes, the insurances, pension, which they call 401k, and also a comprehensive healthcare plan. And that is really a turnkey situation where they just walk in and they are employed with a package, which we offer a gold standard package for our clients. So there's a direct hire model, and this might be if you decide you want to hire under your own entity. So you might be sending UK workers or UK employees to work for your US subsidiary. There you need to abide by the immigration laws. So you will need to, you won't be able to use an employer of record. It's generally more cost beneficial for larger teams or maybe small teams that have a really rapid growth projected in the next 12 months. Sometimes setting up a US entity might be dictated by the industry, or a client might say, we will do business with you, but we need to do it with a US entity. So again, what we can do here is we can set up a bespoke or custom program for your benefits for your employees, and again, advise you, including payroll, the taxes, healthcare, HR compliance, and making sure that we are kind of the advisory piece or the outsourced HR department for your teams in the US. We can also manage those teams for you, and depending on how much support you want to have from us, you know, we can do that as a bespoke model. So just quickly, really things to consider when you're hiring employees in the US is interviewing what you can and can't do in an interview, making sure that you've got an employment budget and you understand the full costs. So generally, and we specialize in biotech and tech industry, and understanding that the salaries in the US can be anywhere from 50 to 30% higher than in the UK, and that with the benefits, the healthcare is the main big ticket item here, because the healthcare, they don't have an NHS or a national insurance situation. So all the admin with the taxes could be 30 to 35% above the salary that you're paying the individual. So it's worth doing a budget projection, which we can help you with. Considering a hiring timeline. So if you need someone quickly and you found a person in the US, we can help you onboard that employee within 5 days. If you need to send someone from the UK, you need to take on board the immigration process, which could take anywhere from 4 to 5 months. And we always recommend using specialists to help you in tax. We have a very robust and strong recruitment network as well as immigration attorneys to help you. So that's me, and always happy to take one-to-one discovery calls to kind of help people put their journey together and explain more of our cost model as well.
Laurie, thank you very much indeed for that, for finishing off with that important HR perspective.
That's okay.